Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into a topic that I find, well, incredibly fascinating. It's all about self-esteem. Specifically, we're looking at how it plays out in Japanese children.
Oh, absolutely. It's such an important topic.
It really is. And to guide us through this deep dive, we're turning to a book called Ki-Ishi. Now, for those who don't speak Japanese, that translates to the textbook of self-esteem for children.
Yeah, the book really gets into like all the different facets of self-esteem, especially within, the context of Japanese society.
It's fascinating how culture plays such a big role, right? Because I have to admit, when I first started researching this, I was pretty surprised to learn that Japan actually has some of the lowest self-esteem rates, compared to other developed nations.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising when you think about, Japan's achievements in technology, education, and other areas.
Exactly. It's like this paradox almost.
Right. But the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
A recent survey by the Japanese Cabinet Office found that only like 58.8% of young people,
Wow, less than 60%.
yeah, age 13 to 29, reported feeling satisfied with themselves.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to, say, the US, the UK, or South Korea, the figures are like significantly higher.
That's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. And what's even more alarming is how much this has changed over time.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, back in 1980, only about 27% of high school students in Japan felt they were, no good.
Okay.
But by 2011, that number had like skyrocketed to 80%.
That's more than tripled.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
Yeah.
And it really underscores like the urgency of understanding what's, contributing to these feelings of inadequacy.
It's like we're not just talking about individual struggles here. It's like a generational shift.
Exactly. It's a societal issue.
Yeah.
And this book, it goes beyond just presenting those like kind of doom and gloom statistics. It delves into the factors that actually contribute to self-esteem.
It offers some solutions or at least some guidance.
Absolutely. And it does that by breaking down self-esteem into these 6 key components. They use this analogy of a tree, which I find so helpful to visualize it.
A tree. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this tree metaphor.
So the roots of the tree, those represent self-respect. It's that, fundamental belief that you are inherently valuable just for being you.
It's like that inherent worthiness we all have.
Yeah.
But sometimes life, kind of chips away at it.
Exactly. And then moving up from the roots, you have the trunk of the tree. That symbolizes self-acceptance.
Self-acceptance.
This is about embracing all parts of yourself, the good, the bad, even, the messy parts.
Especially in today's world, there's so much pressure to be perfect, to present this flawless image. So self-acceptance is huge.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we have the branches. Those represent self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy, that belief in yourself.
Yeah, it's that can-do attitude, that sense that you can achieve goals, overcome challenges.
It's almost like that growth mindset concept, right?
Exactly. You got it. And then, how branches have leaves.
Yeah.
Well, those symbolize self-confidence.
Oh, okay. So it's like self-efficacy leads to self-confidence.
Yeah, that trust in your skills and abilities.
Gotcha. So what about the flowers? Do those have a meaning in this tree?
They do. The flowers represent self-determination, that ability to, make choices, take control of your life, pursue your own path.
Especially for young people who are figuring things out, that feeling of agency is so important.
Absolutely. And finally, we have the fruits of the tree.
Okay, the fruits.
Those symbolize self-usefulness.
Hmm.
It's the feeling that you contribute to something larger than yourself, that you make a difference.
That sense of purpose. It's like we all want to feel like we matter.
Exactly. And what's so powerful about this tree analogy is, it shows how all these elements are connected.
It's not just one thing, it's a whole system.
Exactly. They all work together.
So it's like if one part of the tree is weak, the whole tree could suffer.
Precisely. And that's what we'll be getting into, next. We'll explore some practical strategies, things parents and educators can use to, nurture each of these 6 parts of self-esteem.
Now we're talking. That's what I'm excited to hear about. Let's dig into those strategies.
Okay, so we've got this amazing tree metaphor, right? Each part representing like a crucial element of self-esteem.
Yeah.
But, how do we actually put this into practice? Like, how do we help kids develop these qualities, especially, in Japan?
Well, that's where this book, gets really practical. It offers a bunch of strategies. But one that really stood out to me is they call it the 9.3.1 rule.
The 9.3.1 rule.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So it's this guideline for communicating with kids. It suggests that for every one piece of advice or instruction you give,
Yeah.
you should aim for 3 parts acknowledging and validating their feelings, and 9 parts just, listening.
9 parts listening. That's a lot of listening.
It is, right. And I think it's especially relevant in Japanese culture.
Oh, how so?
Well, because, direct confrontation or criticism can be seen as, like, disrespectful.
Yeah, it can be kind of hurtful
Yeah.
sometimes. So this 9.3.1 rule encourages like a more empathetic approach.
I see. It's more in line with, like, the whole harmony and respect thing.
Exactly.
But does it actually work? Like, can just listening really have that much of an impact?
Well, the book argues that it does. When
Yeah.
you truly listen to kids, without judgment or interruption, it creates a safe space for them.
So they feel heard.
Right, to
Yeah.
express themselves. And that helps them, like, develop self-awareness.
Makes sense. They feel validated.
Exactly. And when you do give advice, the book talks about the importance of specific praise.
Specific praise, what does that mean?
So instead of just saying, like, good job, which is very general,
Right.
you focus on the effort and the process, like behind the child's actions.
So, like, instead of praising the outcome, you praise the steps they took to get there.
Exactly. For example, if
Yeah.
a child, like, has been struggling with math, but has been putting in the effort to practice, instead of saying, you got a good grade,
Mm-hmm.
you could say, like, I'm so proud of you for practicing those multiplication tables every day. Your hard work paid off.
It's like you're focusing on their effort, not just the result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, encourages that growth mindset.
Yeah, yeah. This reminds me of another strategy the book talks about, the wish list.
Oh, yeah, the wish
Yes, I love that idea.
It's so fun.
It's really creative.
Basically, you sit down with your kid and create, like, a visual representation of the dreams.
A vision board, almost.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a collage, a drawing, a list, whatever works.
And that helps them, like, see those aspirations, come to life.
Exactly. And it also opens up, like, this space for conversations,
Yeah.
about their hopes, their dreams.
Like a bonding experience, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's the life chart.
Oh, the life chart. What's that?
It's like a timeline
Right.
where they, map out their past achievements and future goals.
Okay.
It helps them see how far they've come.
It's like a visual representation of their progress, almost.
Exactly. But, it's important to emphasize the journey, not just the destination.
Right. So they don't get too caught up in, like, achieving specific outcomes.
Yeah. It's about celebrating the effort and the resilience.
The process of learning and growing.
Exactly. And all these strategies, the 9.3.1 rule, the specific praise, the wish list, the life chart,
Yeah.
they're all tools to help kids, like, build that foundation of self-esteem.
But what about those everyday challenges? Like tantrums or
So, yeah, those are tough.
social struggles or that constant comparing themselves to others.
I mean, those are, like, so common, especially as kids are growing up.
Yeah.
And the book, it offers some pretty good advice on how to handle those situations. Let's start with tantrums.
Okay, tantrums, they can be really tough, both for the kid and the parent.
Oh, totally. The key is to stay calm and empathetic.
Not always easy.
I know, right? But tantrums are often an expression of, like, frustration or unmet needs.
So it's not about punishing the child, it's about understanding where they're coming from.
Right. It's about helping them, like, regulate their emotions.
So they can, like, learn to express their feelings in healthy ways.
Exactly. And then when it comes to social challenges, which can be, especially tough in Japan.
Why is that?
Well, because, group harmony is so highly valued.
Oh, right.
The book recommends encouraging activities that foster, like, cooperation and empathy.
Things like team sports.
Yeah, team sports, volunteering, even just playing with other kids.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there's the whole comparing themselves to others thing.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one, especially with social media.
Oh, totally. It's like everyone's presenting this perfect version of themselves.
It can be so hard for kids to, like, not get caught up in that.
Yeah, it's tough. So the book's advice is to, help kids recognize their own strengths.
So instead of trying to be like everyone else, they can focus on what makes them unique.
Right. And remind them that true self-worth comes from within, not from, like, external comparisons.
This is all great advice, but it makes me wonder, how much of a role do, like, the parents' own self-esteem play in this?
That's a really good question. And the book actually addresses that directly.
Really?
Yeah. There's a whole chapter on parental self-reflection.
Interesting.
Because, a parent's own self-esteem, their beliefs about themselves, all of that
Yeah.
it really impacts how they interact with their kids.
It's like kids pick up on our vibes even if we don't say anything.
Exactly. And that's why the book includes these like self-assessment checklists for parents.
So they can see where they stand, maybe identify some areas for growth.
Exactly. Because, we can't give our kids what we don't have ourselves.
If we're always putting ourselves down, our kids are going to notice that.
Right. So it's about modeling self-acceptance and self-compassion.
Like, we have to practice what we preach, basically.
Totally. And that brings us back to those 6 pillars of self-esteem. If we can cultivate those in ourselves,
Yeah.
we're more likely to nurture them in our kids too.
It's like we're all connected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all branches on that same tree.
I love that analogy. But, talking about Japan specifically, are there any, cultural factors that play a role here?
Oh, definitely. The book talks about that too. Like, one thing it brings up is the emphasis on conformity.
Oh, yeah. Fitting in, not standing out too much. That's definitely a thing here.
Right. And that can, sometimes clash with the whole individuality aspect of self-esteem.
So how do you balance those two things?
Well, it's not about rejecting tradition, It's about finding that middle ground.
Honoring those values of respect and harmony,
Yep.
while also encouraging kids to express themselves.
Exactly. And another interesting point is how praise is often given in Japan.
Oh, yeah. It's very subtle, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of, like, good job, or you're amazing.
It's more implied.
Exactly. And while that's, rooted in humility, it can make it hard for kids to understand that positive feedback.
They might not realize they did something great.
Right. So the book encourages parents to, adapt their communication style,
Okay.
to find ways to express appreciation that, resonate with Japanese culture, but still convey that message of, hey, you did a good job.
So it's about finding that balance between cultural sensitivity and being clear.
Exactly. And this ties into, traditional Japanese parenting styles, too.
Which are,
Often emphasizing obedience and respect for authority.
right, which are important, but
Yeah, but they can sometimes, make it hard for kids to develop that, independent thinking.
that sense of agency that we talked about before.
Exactly. So the book suggests finding a balance between structure and discipline
Okay.
and giving kids opportunities to, make their own choices.
So they can develop that sense of autonomy.
Yeah. And then there's, the whole societal pressure to succeed academically in Japan.
Oh, yeah. The education system here is intense.
It is. And while striving for excellence is great, the book argues that this focus on achievement,
Yeah.
it can sometimes, negatively impact kids' emotional well-being.
It's all about balance, isn't it?
Right. And then, of course, there's social media.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other beast.
I know, right? But it's, especially influential in Japan, where social conformity is, already a big thing.
So it's like all those pressures are amplified.
Yeah. And the book, encourages parents to, talk to their kids about social media.
Open communication.
Help them develop those critical thinking skills so they can, navigate that world in a healthy way.
It's like teaching them to see beyond those perfect images.
Exactly. Because, at the end of the day, building self-esteem is a journey.
Not a destination.
It's a process of, self-discovery and growth.
There are going to be bumps along the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the important thing is to keep moving forward.
To keep learning and growing.
Exactly. And that, leads us to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Where we'll, recap some key takeaways and leave you with some things to think about.
I'm ready for it. Let's wrap things up. So we've talked about a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. From those statistics about self-esteem in Japan, to those 6 pillars.
Yeah, entering.
And all those strategies, it's been a lot.
It has. It's really made me think about, how we approach parenting.
Me too.
So before we finish up, is there, one key takeaway you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, self-esteem, it's not something you're just born with.
It's not like you have it or you don't.
Exactly. It's a skill.
Something you can develop.
Yeah, like a muscle you can, strengthen over time.
Through practice and effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads to another important point. There's no one right way to build self-esteem.
It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Especially when you consider, the cultural context.
Yeah. Right. What works in one culture might not work in another.
Yeah. We have to be mindful of that.
Adapt and experiment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And be patient,
Right.
with ourselves and with our kids.
Because it's a journey, right? It's not going to happen overnight.
And there are going to be, bumps along the way.
Challenges and setbacks.
For sure. But that's okay. It's all part of the process.
I think it's easy to, like, get caught up in wanting our kids to be, confident and successful.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But we have to remember that they're still learning and growing.
And the world they're growing up in, it's not easy.
With all the pressure from school and social media.
It's tough.
But even with all that, there's so much we can do to support them.
Even small things like, a word of encouragement.
Or just listening to them.
Yeah, you can make a big difference.
It's about creating that space where they feel safe and loved.
Exactly. And that brings me to something I wanted to ask our listeners to think about.
Okay, what's that?
Think back to your own childhood.
Yeah.
What messages did you get about yourself?
From your parents, from society.
Yeah, both good and bad.
Because those messages, they shape us, don't they?
They do. And we might be passing those same messages on to our kids, even without realizing it.
So it's about becoming aware of those patterns, breaking those cycles.
Exactly. And that's really what this book is all about, empowering kids to love themselves.
To be confident in who they are.
And to face the world with, courage and kindness.
It's a beautiful message.
And remember, you're not alone in this.
There are resources out there, people who can help.
Don't be afraid to reach out for support.
To all the parents and caregivers out there, you're doing amazing work. Keep it up.
Yeah, seriously, you're making a difference.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating deep dive into, well, whatever piques our curiosity.
Until then, take care.